Hello again, Anna Schmidt here, house healer, spirit clearer and psychic development teacher. And today we're going to be looking at an interview I did recently with Tim Walter. Now Tim is a house healer and an alternative life coach, and he will be talking to us about what is house healing, what he does as a house healer, and some of his favourite and least favourite parts of house healing. He will also be telling us about the KnightsRose House Healing Network. Let's get into our interview with Tim. Okay, Tim, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, well, I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach these days. I've been doing this work, house healing, for I suppose it's coming up to, what is it, 8 years or so, maybe, professionally. Before that, I spent 30 years as a video and conference producer, a very, very different world. I used to be in that corporate world, actually, working for blue chip clients, traveling all over the world, running these conferences, and basically getting extremely stressed by having to deliver all this work. But what happened was, at one point during that time, in 1998, we, as a family, we moved house, and we moved into a property that the layman would say was a haunted house. We didn't know it was at the time. We actually thought, oh, it's a bit unusual. But yeah, it turned out to have a particular resident that wasn't visible, and she made her presence felt over a number of months, and we got somebody in to sort of find out what was going on in the house, because it was all a bit mysterious for us. We'd never been sort of involved in anything, or really had any attitude or kind of major feeling about things in the subtle realms, as we now sort of understand them to be. So it was all quite new. It was all quite, basically the management upstairs, as my mentor tends to refer to them, taking the opportunity to completely change my life by putting me into that house and introducing somebody that basically died about 100 years before we were present. So that started me on a completely different journey in life, which, as you can imagine, was very, very different to the corporate world. And what happened for me was that as I was learning more and more about the subtle realms and about the spirits that can be around us, and all of the characters and personalities and aspects of the invisible realms, clearly the corporate world that I was involved in got more and more boring and less interesting. And I was just like, yeah, I really don't want to do anything of that. This is really interesting. And so I was getting more and more into this other stuff. But it took me a long, long time to actually make the decision to step away from the corporate world and enter this world completely, 100%. And really, the big change happened in 2010 when Hamish Miller passed away. He finally went back upstairs, went back home, and I kind of said to myself, well, if I don't do something about this now, step into this fully, I'm never going to do it, and I owe it to Hamish to do so. So I will step into his shoes in that respect. Obviously, Hamish was such a great man that I don't say that I'm stepping into his shoes fully in that respect. It's just like, I will do what I need to do. And so that's where we are. I don't know whether that makes sense. It sounds a little bit waffly.
No, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. So tell us a little bit about the tools of your trade. So as a house healer, what are some of the tools that you use to do your work? How do you do your work? Do you visit people's homes? Do you work remotely?
Well, the house healing work is all the way that I do it, and the way that I teach it is that it's all done remotely. What we have, what we understand is that there's far more to human beings than the physical aspect and the brain and the thinking process, the subjective reality that we all have. which is all about our feeling and the way we interpret information that we get from other people and from places. That's not all locked within the brain. Science has this expression of calling the fortress of the brain, the skull being, you know, holding everything, and the brain is in here, which clearly the physical matter is, but the information is out here. And this feeds into the way that science is looking at the quantum aspect of reality now, where there's a massive movement within science that is really saying that our reality, our physical reality, is manifested from the quantum realm. And that's one of the leading scientific theories right now. And we've got to bear in mind that they've been doing quantum theory work for way over 100 years now. So it's not like it's something new. It's just that, you know, all of this sort of information and knowledge takes time to filter out from those people doing the research out into the public arena. So what do I use? How do I do the house healing work? Well, the reason I talked about the quantum aspect of reality is that actually that seems to be what we're accessing when we are doing work remotely. Everything in the quantum realm is linked, and so therefore we as an individual receiver, because fundamentally people are just transmitters and receivers, so we can receive information about anything anywhere in the world to varying degrees of success. You know, none of this is like it's not like saying, well, there's this amazing way of living that is utterly 100% correct and 100% foolproof. It's not like there's a magic switch that suddenly all of your human you know, inadequacies and fallibilities disappear. It's not that at all. In fact, for people like me who were not born as natural sensitives and didn't grow up with that natural, sensitive, intuitive connection, it actually takes a lot of work to get in there and find the information. But like everything, it takes practice. So to answer your question, dowsing is the key thing, the key tool that we use in actually finding information. And what that is basically a very, I was going to say a very primitive way, but it's a very basic way of asking a question and getting a response. And therefore you build a picture of information with that connection. But as you're dowsing, and now dowsing is using a pendulum or a set of rods, but for the house healing work, we tend to use a pendulum. I'm doing this because in fact, we would use a pendulum rather like that. So that would be the pendulum. And I would have a floor plan of somebody's house in Australia or somewhere like that. And we'd simply be looking for information and you'd be getting a response from the pendulum. That's basic dowsing. But obviously, it's not about watching the pendulum and just sort of saying, oh yes, it's now turning that way, so that means that we have yes, and that's a yes for that bit of information that we found. It's actually about exploring what is happening in your subjective reality as you're linking in and using this device as the key to open the door to link in and gain access to information. So that's what we do, is we use the dowsing to open the door to get access. We're connecting to the quantum realm or to the management, if you like, because they are part of that, part of the consciousness that is available in that realm. And they or it are providing it the information for us. And so the key to the house healing is all about learning to work with your own sensitivity and your own intuition and trusting that intuitive information that comes to you and having faith that it is correct. And that's probably the hardest part, is actually having that trust and faith.
Wonderful. So I'm going to ask you now, what are your favourite and least favourite parts of doing the house healing work?
Well, the least favourite part is having to write up the reports. Yeah, that's the admin side. But I mean, the favourite aspect, what I really like working with and finding out about is something that we call earth energy. So it's the way this electromagnetic or geomagnetic field of information flows through a property, and what that can tell us about the circumstance of the individual that lives there, and also the circumstance of the land. Now, when I say the circumstance, what I'm talking about is actually not only the present circumstance, the present information that's there, but also past. So a lot of information that is available from the land in particular will apply to things that have happened there in the past. Now, you might say, well, can you also look for things that happen in the future? That's open to debate, to be frank. But I think primarily because we can look into the past because there's a facet of memory that exists. And so as we move forward on the arrow of time, as science calls it, then obviously what we're leaving behind is memory in some way. So there's been an information field that's been created by our awareness, and therefore that can be accessed. Looking ahead, where the information field will be, but we haven't yet passed it, is a different matter. So earth energy is fundamentally a very subtle field of energy, and what we find is like lines that weave like rivers across the landscape. And those lines are really just more focused aspects of the overall field of earth energy. So if you think about a magnetic field, there are obviously lines of more dominant magnetism within the overall magnetic field, and that's what earth energy is like. There are currents of energy, currents of electricity that run across the surface of the earth, for example. Now, those are called telluric currents. Those are a scientific fact. That's yeah, nobody says that's woo-woo. That's fact. Earth energy is a bit like that because we are accessing, as I say, a sort of geomagnetic field of energy. But that field of energy that we're accessing, that is called earth energy, has a very strong and close connection also to human consciousness. And that's where it gets really interesting as far as I'm concerned. But it doesn't really, this aspect that gets really interesting for me is not necessarily something that comes out in house healing per se, when we're helping an individual rebalance their lives by working with these subtle energies. But what to me is really interesting is that earth energy is intimately connected with the way that we as a species perceive the reality in which we live. Because as spiritual thinking has said for eons, this is illusory and is created from within. And actually, earth energy seems to be part of the mechanism, combining with what goes on in the kind of network of process that goes on in here, but also comes out here, is part linking with earth energy and is part of that formation of the reality in which we experience. So that all sounds rather heavy and deep, because I guess it is. But on a simple day-to-day level, what it means is the simple thing that we see from a lot of kind of self-development gurus. There are people like Mike Dooley, for example, and he talks about thoughts become things, and that's the reason that, you know, that's true. Thoughts absolutely do manifest and can be seen and expressed in the reality in which we live. There's no two ways about that. But it's a far more complex process than a lot of the lifestyle and self-development gurus would have us believe. The KnightsRose House Healing Network is something that sort of became a logical progression from the first group of students that I was teaching. For some years, I'd done some one-to-one mentoring work and coaching work, and it became obvious that actually there was sufficient interest in the house healing technique to teach it to groups. So I started doing that. And as we were going through that process, because what I do is I have a structured course of 10 months, because there's quite a lot of self-development work that goes on in that 10 months. So it's quite intensive, actually. Some people have described it as life-changing, which is great, because that's exactly what it should be. Anyway, so it became obvious that, you know, if we wanted people to be brave enough to set themselves up in business to help other people, and to be able to build their businesses to a level where they could earn an income from it, then actually it was going to take a lot more than just 10 sessions of, you know, here's join the dots together, this is how you do it. So that the KnightsRose House Healing Network is about supporting each other. So everybody that's gone through the training process has the opportunity to join the network and be a part of the team and the group. And what we're finding and seeing very clearly is that the learning continues on in those sessions. We have monthly sessions, monthly group meetings, we've got a Facebook page, all this sort of stuff. But there's a huge amount of knowledge and wisdom. And what is absolutely wonderful from my point of view is that everybody in the network actually has their own unique interpretation of what they're finding, of how they're working with these subtle energies. And it is about sharing that interpretation and that understanding that each individual has, so that others can look at it and say, oh, well, okay, that's interesting. I don't find it quite like that. I get it like this. So they can say they have these conversations within themselves, and they're learning in that process. Because, you know, if I, for example, if I take a little hint from somebody, or there's a way that somebody works, and I try that out when I'm next working on a client's house, upstairs is very aware that that's what I'm doing, and they'll assist or not. You know, they may well say, no, Tim, that's not for you. Don't even try that. Don't even worry about that. It's, you know, so there's this conversation that goes on all the time with upstairs and with each other in the network. The group, I will just say this, the group, it's called the KnightsRose House Healing Network. It is not called Tim Walter's team of, you know, house healers, right? I am there, I will give guidance, I assist and facilitate the learning of the group, but it is not about me telling and teaching anymore at that stage. What it's about is everybody in the network making it work and building on it. But what we do have, which is going to be really, really interesting as it grows and as the abilities of everybody in the group increases, because that is what happens, is that once you start to access these energies, then actually your ability to access and to work with them increases exponentially. As that ability of all of those people in the network increases and grows, it will reach a level where it will have significant impact on many people's lives. And that is why I'm doing it, because it not only affects people's lives, but it affects the seeming external environment of the world. So we, as a species, are supposed to be guardians of the physical aspect of this world in which we exist and live. It's up to us to do that and to take charge, take control. These are the words I want to say, but it's actually to step back into our role of being responsible for what we see around us. So it is just simply stepping back into our power as a species. And we do that in alignment with all of the subtle energy aspects that exist right across the scale. So this can be nature spirits, this can be angelic beings, this can be all sorts of other beings. But what we are doing and what we need to do is to realign ourselves in that aspect of creation, so that actually everything flourishes, because that's the way it should be.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I have really enjoyed listening to you talk about house healing, and it's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. It's been a pleasure.